What's up, guys? First things first, I'm preparing an end of the year video, recapping all of this year's travel experiences, ranking some of the best to the worst, in addition covering some Q&A. So if you guys have some questions for me, slide on into my Instagram DMs. My name is in the caption down below, but it's Patrick Flies Planes, and I'll be answering some of the best or most commonly asked questions at the end of the year in that video. In the meantime though, let's head off to Seoul. I cannot believe it finally worked out. After multiple attempts, I successfully got on Asiana's 747 in seat 1K, the first class seat on the main deck all the way up in the nose of the aircraft, in front of the pilot. I booked Incheon to Shanghai in row 1, the famous lower deck row ahead of the pilots, and then returning the same day, Shanghai to Incheon in the upper deck. The trip didn't go exactly as planned, but I was still excited to have another chance to try it all out. Here in Incheon's Terminal 1, Asiana does have a specific enclosed check-in area for premium passengers, that is those traveling with status or in a business class ticket. I unfortunately arrived about 15 minutes before it opened, however, so I just got in the queue and waited for them to open the doors for us. Once checked in, outbound security checks took about 20 to 30 minutes as there are multiple check-in entrances. However, there was only a couple open at this time of day. I did enjoy the fact that my boarding pass had my seat labeled as both an aisle and a window seat. I didn't have any sort of priority lane to go through here at immigration, so I got in the main lane where it ended up taking about 20 minutes to get through. Out into the terminal, I always have to stop at the departure board. It may not be the flipboard style like what you'll find in Frankfurt, but it's still fun to see that it at least looks the same. The central area also has a bunch of screens around the information desks with departure information, along with an interactive screen to help you find your gate. Here you can see my path for my gate to Shanghai. On the way to the gate, a stop at the lounge is required. Asiana actually has a few lounge locations in Seoul. This specific location was one that used to house their first class lounge. Since then, Asiana has abolished their first class and opted to the business suite name instead, with the same service generally as business class but with a more expensive cost due to the seat upgrade. The lounge, similarly, has gone from the first class lounge, as seen here in this picture I took last year, to the business suite lounge now. Up the escalator, there is the entrance to the business and business suite lounges. You can scan your boarding pass to gain entrance or visit the front desk for assistance. It may not be the largest lounge in the world, but as mentioned, there are a couple of different lounges to choose from here at Incheon. The entrance does have some tables, but I've typically found them to be empty, as the main part of the lounge is just down the hall. Against the wall, there's these isolated pods. I have slept here for a while, even though it's just a chair and a stool, really. Honestly, even though there isn't too much space, they use it so well that you have plenty of comfort, space, and lighting regardless of where you choose to sit, not to mention the great views of the ramp. The food buffet is at the back of the lounge, and at this time of day was the breakfast buffet. Asiana does an excellent job at keeping all the items stocked as well, with very attentive staff around the lounge. I do like the amount of fresh items they have, including pasta salad and salad. I also like their sandwiches, which are cut to be the most perfect triangle that you've ever seen. There's also bread, and cereal. Then is the hot dishes, which I do like, but I've been in this lounge a few times this year, and it's been the same stuff every time. After that, it was time for a shower. You get a room key similar to a hotel, which gets you into your shower suite. The rooms are actually a fairly good size with everything you could need to get ready for the day. Just keep in mind that it can get busy and have a wait, so if you don't have a super long layover, get on the waiting list early and they'll give you a buzzer for when your room is ready. After my shower, it was time to head to my gate to get a view of this airplane finally. I mean, I waited since 2020 to get this, so if it wasn't there, I might have just had to give up on traveling altogether. Off to the end of one of the wings of Incheon's Terminal 1 is Gate 6, ours for our flight today to Shanghai Pudong. And there it was, in all its glory and elusiveness, the Asiana 747. Formerly a workhorse for them, now with only the one left in passenger configuration, as the rest have joined their cargo fleet after being converted. Now, my first ever international flight was actually last year on a 747, as I wanted to get on some before they were gone for good, so I'm enjoying seeing it in yet another airline scheme. They had a separate gate for business class passengers, and once heading down the jet bridge, we had yet again some more magnificent views of this excellent airplane. In the door to the left, we reach the first class cabin of this airplane. Actually, I say that, but it's no longer first class. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even include a paid seat upgrade like the A380. If you buy a business class seat, you can sit in the 222 configuration that's always been this business class, or nab one of these former first class seats and have a ton more space. Before settling into the seat, we had to store our bag, as there isn't a ton of underseat storage, leading us to one of the more unique aspects of this 747 nose cabin. Since the cockpit is on the upper deck, the front of the cabin has only a closet. You can stash your bags in here, but also any coats or anything else you want to put away. You can see here this cabin, consisting with mostly a 1-1 configuration, with those two random seats in the middle. Only a few of the seats in this cabin were taken on today's flight, so it really wasn't an issue on today's flight as far as being able to snag one of these seats. I guess that's the benefit of these Shanghai flights that have been fairly empty since returning from COVID. Looking around my seat today at the front of the cabin, which is definitely outdated, but that's kind of the charm with this seat that comes with an aircraft of this age. Quite usually that's a bad thing, but with the 747, it couldn't be better. Interestingly enough, Asiana still uses a similar print on their seats in business classes today, as I flew this route a few months ago with their A350, and my seat looked very similar. Against the aisle side of the seat is a nice sized countertop right above one of the large storage cubbies at the seat. You figure you could store any items that you needed on the flight in here, and the rest of your stuff can go in that bulkhead locker. The window side of the seat has a little privacy partition, mostly because the space here is so roomy that privacy can become a bit of an issue without these. Luckily, being in row 1 meant that at least there was no one in front of me, not even a galley. You also had this little reading light over your shoulder that could be turned on near the seat controls. The headset jack and remote is just below that, and it's slightly outdated style but still pulls out to control the TV, or you can use the keypad on the back. The seat adjustments are in front of that, consisting of more adjustments than some current day seats, consisting of presets and individual adjustments. I had 3 windows at my seat, all with great views, although slightly angled forwards because of where we are in this fuselage. And below that is a counter type surface labeled no storage, although I saw plenty of items resting there around the cabin. The table retracts into the counter, and once pulled out, it's a nice size, although it's peeling a little bit around the edges. My favorite feature still is just the fact that it swivels, so that you can get up mid-meal if you need to without having to move everything that's on that table. Against the side, we have a USB and a wall-type power plug, although it doesn't seem like it would fit all of the world's plugs, and the outlets didn't charge things super well. I did appreciate this little pocket here to hold devices being charged, although it wasn't huge, as you can see my charging cube just about filled the slot all on its own. The little pocket in front of that contains all of the seatback literature in Asiana's signature little pouches. The TV kind of made me laugh, honestly. It's just kind of a strange mount for the TV. It reminds me of like an old computer monitor. The footrest is actually a pretty good size and not restricted by another seat. Makes sense when you figure this seat used to be considered a first-class seat. The underseat storage was a bit of a funny shape, so my backpack fit a little bit crooked. Luckily, I could keep it in the locker to my left. The overhead panel is basically a little nostalgia throwback. There's these lights that produce almost no light at all, yet I kinda love it. And then there's the overhead air vents. Why did we ever stop putting these in half of the new aircraft? Then one of the stranger things that I kinda like on these Asiana aircraft is their carpet. Looks a bit like TV static, but if you look closer you'll see the Asiana colors used sparsely as accent colors. The amenities on Asiana flights are consistent with these slippers that must be for people whose toes get hot or something. We also get these headphones that are probably some of the least comfortable headphones I've ever found. I do appreciate the pen and refreshment wipe, although we don't get amenity kits, so this is all we have for this super short hop over to Shanghai. We do have a million windows at this seat, between our three, the windows for the other seats right over my shoulder, and then I had a great view across to see through the windows of seat 1A. One of the nicest things about Asiana is the bow from the flight crew. Asian carriers are some of the best at hospitality as they pay attention to every little detail. As we taxi out to the runway, let's talk about the ultra marathon of a journey it took for me to get here. I'll start off by saying that when I graduated from college, my goal was to start traveling since I had never even left the US. Specifically, I asked for my grad present to be money that I could put towards flying on a 747. Well, since then, I've booked 13 flights on a 747, but 10 of them were canceled or had equipment swaps. Back in 2020, I had plans to fly the British Airways, KLM, and Thai 747s in an epic trip around the world, but all three airlines retired the fleet just months before my trip. This year, I tried to fly the Air China 747s twice, and it was swapped both times to 777s. Fortunately, I was able to fly the Lufthansa 747 in 2022, but sprinkled throughout that all, I booked the Asiana 747 6 times. Each time, I planned my trip to Seoul to get on this amazing aircraft, and each time they swapped it to either an A350 or A330. Each time I vowed that it wasn't worth planning on anymore, since it would just let me down each time. But when Air Peace canceled my flight to Mumbai, I was left with a gap in my trip, only about 5 days prior to this flight. I checked and it still showed the 747, so I decided I would give it another shot. Lo and behold, the aviation gods finally got on my side and allowed me a chance to get a second Airlines 747 under my belt, and here I am, finally on board this Asiana 747. In the air, I first had to check out the lavatory, and on an airplane this old, the lavatory is about what you'd expect. As a matter of fact, it kinda reminded me of a slightly larger bus bathroom. I was at least happy to see nice amenities of soap and lotion, a comb, mouthwash, and dental kit, making up for the lack of amenity kits. The menu was in two parts, one for the drinks and one for food. There was a fairly normal selection of drinks. I typically choose the tea on Asian carriers since it tends to be incredible, although I found it interesting to only have one red and one white wine option. For the food, we had only the one meal on this roughly 1.5 hour flight, with the choices of beef pasta or spicy pork. I decided to go with the beef stew and pasta option. All of it was extremely tasty, but it was a lot for 10 a.m. In addition to the beef and pasta with vegetables that we had on the main dish, we also had our side of a smoked salmon salad and also this chocolate mousse cake. Also, they came around with the bread choices, of which I decided to go with the garlic bread, fully committing to lunch. Checking up next on the silverware. As you guys know, I love when that silverware is inscribed with the logo. Asiana not putting their logo, but instead just their name on the back of the silverware. With the meal wrapped up, it was time to look at the seat modes. As we mentioned before, there's plenty of different ways to adjust the seat, and I wanted to take a look at some of those, starting of course with the fully seated position. From there, you can hit one of the presets where it automatically goes into that mode. If you want to stop it in between one of the presets, you just have to hit the red button that looks like it might be more of a do not disturb type button. Eventually, the seat does go all the way flat. Kind of. It does lie flat, but not at 180 degrees. This is what we would call an angled lie flat. In addition, it was kind of interesting having so many gaps in the seat, obviously with the hard footrest sitting in the way, but also the gaps between the torso cushion and the seat cushion. There was no bedding supplied on this flight, totally fine considering it's only an hour and a half all daytime flight, so we just got a sense for how comfortable the seat was in its bed mode. Definitely worn in, kind of like an old couch, so pretty comfortable in that sense. In addition, because it's a first class seat, you can have some good space for your feet unless you wedge them all the way in. But if you're not super tall, you can slide back on your seat a little bit, and then you have significantly more room. Looking through some of the in-flight entertainment options, I was pleasantly surprised to see some of the similar options that you'd find on other Asiana flights. The main difference being that the interface they use for the seatback TVs is definitely an older style than what you'll find on more of their current airplanes. Regardless, when you hit movies or TV shows, you're presented a number of categories. By picking your category, there's multiple pages of movies and TV shows that you can watch on board your flight. As usual, there's much less TV shows than there is movies on the seatback TVs. I did find the selection to be interesting considering they don't have most of the things that's found on normal carriers. A lot of the comedies that you'd find around the world aren't going to be found on these Asiana flights. If you just want to listen to something, they do have news on demand and broadcasted. In addition, you also can find a number of music channels and albums pre-recorded and stored on the seatback TV. And with old airplanes comes old games like Pac-Man, Sudoku, and Tetris. Similar to most airlines nowadays, they also have the kids section with movies, TV shows, music, and games, but specifically those suited for kids. The travel page does have some cool things. First off is the air show, which is basically just the map. Then came the in-flight exercises, which is a series of stretches and different workouts you can do just in your seat to keep your circulation going. Lastly, and perhaps my most favorite, is the travel conversations and entry documents. Basically, a series of videos of how to have simple conversations in different languages, so that depending on where you're going, you're able to have a pretty easy conversation with someone. As a lot of these airlines like to push the duty-free shopping, they also had a shopping catalog right on the seatback TV. And then there was the chat room, the seat-to-seat chat or the seat-to-ground chat. While I didn't get a chance to try it out, the seat-to-ground chat seemed to work by swiping your card on the handset, and then you could talk for $12.50 per minute. This opposed to the seat-to-seat chat, where you could simply just send a message to any other seat on board the airplane for free. The map was not interactive, but it did autoplay through a number of slides. different zooms, and different flight information so that you could keep track of where you were on your journey. I was surprised to see that you could add things to your favorites. You can see here the Add to My Videos tab. That was pretty easily accessible at the top of your screen, where you could go to your entertainment and find all the things that you had saved. Something that isn't found on most current day entertainment screens, let alone these older screens. Not entirely surprising, there is no in-flight Wi-Fi on board. As a matter of fact, Asiana has Wi-Fi on a surprisingly little amount of their flights in their network. Now, usually when I take these flights, I try and take one of the longer possible flights so that I can really take in the entire experience. However, with the elusiveness of this aircraft and very specific routes, I ended up just having to fly it on whichever one I was able to possibly have my best chance at. That being said, an hour and a half on board this airplane is definitely not enough to fully take it all in, which is why I was planning on flying it back to Incheon once I got to Shanghai in the upper deck, so I could experience both of the most important things of the 747, the seat in the nose and the seat in the upper deck. Some of the things I had to check out was the view of those double engines and special 747-400 wingtip. I was able to get the best view of those from the galley window. In addition, in that galley you can also find the stairs to the upper deck. Now, stairs nowadays have become a bit more decorative depending on which airline you're on. The 747-400, however, being a little bit older of an airplane, definitely has some older looking stairs. The 747 has and always will be an iconic airplane. They were getting old before COVID as airlines began retirement plans for them, with all US airlines ditching them before the pandemic. But the pandemic just put the 747's retirement into hyperspeed. It seemed as if we would only see the 747 fly for a few more years. Nowadays, you'll see them flying for a select group of airlines, but most of them have announced their plans for retirement already, Lufthansa being the only one vowing to keep them around for a little bit longer, and even planning potential renovation and upgrade to their 747-8 variants. This Asiana 747, the last of their passenger fleet, is set to be retired within the next year, most likely being sent to the cargo realm. So while it took me ages to finally get on it, I'm just glad I was able to get on it before it was gone for good. But about an hour and a half later, far too short, we were making our final approach into Shanghai Pudong. The seat is old. No one's nominating it for any awards, but dang is it cool. I mean, we're flying the 747, the queen of the skies in her dying days, on an airline with only one single one of these left in their fleet. Not only that, but in the famous row 1, located in front of the cockpit and potentially the most private seat I've ever had on an airplane. I am so grateful that I was able to experience it, and getting the chance to do it even just this one single time negates all the pain and failures that it took to make it happen. I'll keep hunting down 747s to try out as many as I can, with Mahan Air and possibly Saudia operating the 400 variant, Korean Air operating the Dash 8 variant, and Air China and Lufthansa still operating the 400 and Dash 8 variants. The hunt continues, but this is airline number 2 of the Queen off the bucket list for now at least. I'm curious though how many of y'all have flown the 747 and what your experience was with it. Do you have a favorite airline that used it? A favorite configuration? It's iconic and usually comes with plenty of memories. Now once we were in Pudong, the trip took a bit of an unfortunate and different turn. I was originally planning to proceed to transit immigration and get right back on the same plane in the upper deck back to Incheon 2.5 hours later. For whatever reason though, Air New Zealand passengers were the only ones being let through transit immigration. I instead had to fully clear immigration, then go to the ticket counter to get my boarding pass, and back through security and outbound immigration. This confused the world out of the immigration officers, as even though I have a 10-year tourism visa for China, they sent me to the transit visa counter instead, who eventually sent me back to the main counter, and then I ended up getting sent to the side to a customs agent, who was actually extremely helpful, and eventually helped me get through one of the lines and off to the check-in desks. The only problem is that originally, with 2.5 hours to get the transit process done, I now had just under an hour. I sprinted upstairs to find only that the Asiana counter had completely closed and they could not get me a boarding pass. I tried all the other Star Alliance carriers to see if they could help, and I even tried going through immigration and security using only my ticket number and passport, since I wasn't able to get a boarding pass for the return flight. But I was turned away. Needing to get back to Incheon for my ongoing flight at the very least, I was now left with only a single flight that fit my time frame. A China Eastern A321 with only business class seats available, departing from the other terminal in an hour and 10 minutes. I once again took off sprinting, booking the ticket frantically on my phone while running through the airport, got my ticket at the desk labeled last call, then was taken through immigration so I could get to the front of the line and make my flight, and then finally getting lost in the terminal and being the very last person on that flight. And just to make things worse, the Asiana 747 back to Incheon actually departed an hour late. It actually sat behind our airplane holding short of the runway, as if just mocking me for not making it. But I did eventually make it back to Incheon, just not on the upper deck of a 747. But at least I got on that airplane in some capacity. So the aviation gods kinda took care of me at least. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Don't forget to send me some questions on my Instagram in the video caption for my end of year recap video. But until next week, safe travels, and I'll see y'all next time.